Greetings. My name is Tim Adrians. I'm with the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition, and welcome to Tea Time. We're going to be talking about a topic which is a hot button topic. It's important. It's Sharia law. And you might be wondering right off the bat, how does that make any sense with the Tea Party and tea time? We are primarily taxed enough already, and that's our tagline, but we are not just about taxes with the Tea Party. We're about the U.S. Constitution and the foundation of our government, about who we are as a people, our society. And we are finding right now that there is an influx of people who are looking to create Sharia law in America, which we believe runs contrary to the United States Constitution. Our organization, the Tea Party in general, is non-sectarian, so this isn't really about Islam per se. This is about whether or not there will be a separation of mosque and state, and that is what we feel is important. Today I have with me Laura Walsh.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Laura. And you're with our group, and you seem to be, I think, our resident expert on Sharia.
Oh, like a lot of people, I'm learning about a lot of topics I never, really was exposed to before.
Now, could you tell people who may not know what Sharia is?
It's a set of rules Islam has set from the very beginning of their religion, from the 7th century. And basically, Sharia means the way. And so they're meant as rules that will guide the secular, the religious, the private, and the public lives of Muslims.
So the way. So this is, the Sharia law is basically telling you what you're going to do and how you're going to do it.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, how is that a problem for us here in America with our United States Constitution?
Well, what's really interesting, if we break it out, because the reason we started delving into this topic, Tim, was a number of us, was because when we were at the Ground Zero mosque rally, they were talking about Sharia law coming to the United States, and that's really what the mosque was about, was Sharia.
Yeah, actually the idea of speaking about Sharia is something that, right. If you recall, we had our Tea Party on the Green on April 15th,
yes.
The second annual one there in Hackensack.
Right.
And a woman came up to me after I had just gone down from the podium and said, "You folks are missing the boat." Now, she was an individual whose father was an ambassador to the United States. She was actually born in Tehran, in Iran, and she came here and was at the Tea Party event saying that we are missing the boat, that our greatest threat is not over taxation. Our greatest threat is not liberalism, but it's Sharia.
Interesting.
So it's something that has been in the back of my mind as the thought of what we have as a problem.
Right.
So how is Sharia being the way of Islam, how things are supposed to be, how is that a contrary to our U.S. Constitution? Well,
what's interesting is they're flouting it out as being compatible, right? They being the Muslim community saying that America is Sharia compliant. So when we look into that, it's absolutely polar opposites. It's not even,
they're saying that America should become Sharia compliant?
Well, they say that that our existing Constitution and our way of life is just very compatible to Sharia, is what the Imam Rauf, who has the Ground Zero Mosque, I read a number of his speeches and his articles, and that was his argument.
If our U.S. Constitution is compliant to Sharia?
That was his claim, right.
Okay. So how is it not compliant?
On many levels. If you break it out, first, freedom of religion, the First Amendment, right? In America, we're free to worship or not. And they said, the founders said, I don't care what a man believes as long as he doesn't break my leg or pick my pocket, right? So we're very free. Well, that's not the same under Sharia. If you look at a country like Saudi Arabia, which is Sharia compliant, the entire country is Muslim. People who are non-Muslim and identified solely as Christians or Jewish people can practice their religion, but they can't practice it in public. It has to be private. If you're caught anywhere in Saudi Arabia practicing your religion, even in a private setting, you will be imprisoned. If you're a visitor and you want to practice your religion while you're visiting Saudi Arabia in a private space, you're deported.
Well, I understand that in Mecca, for example, they actually have road signs that say that if you're not a Muslim, exit here. that you're not even
Really?
allowed into the city of Mecca if you're a non-Muslim.
Right, that's what I heard as well.
So what I'm hearing, or what is the fear, is that if Muslim law, Sharia law, is instituted in the United States, that there could be a threat to our basic freedoms of religion that we currently have.
Absolutely, and it's actually not if it will come, but it's here. And there's been some recent cases that have been highlighted in the news. Remember the judge in New Jersey who was ruling, there was a case before him, a man and his wife she said he had raped her. So there were charges brought. I think there was an order of protection. And the husband or the man's defense was, well, yeah, I did it, judge, but it's part of Sharia. I'm allowed to. She's my wife. And so the judge ruled that, in fact, he was complying to his religion, and so he ruled he was not guilty. Now, the case was brought again, it was appealed, and it was brought before another judge who had a completely different ruling, thank goodness. But that was a Sharia ruling.
Right. Oh, wow. Yeah, so
So
one of
it's
the
here.
one of the difficulties that I see is that with Sharia, women will be taking a very different role in society.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that runs completely opposite to the gains and changes. And I guess one of the things that people don't understand is that the United States Constitution has a beauty that it allows it to have amendments to it. So, for example, when we speak of the people, we're speaking of men and women, even though our Declaration of Independence said that all men are created equal.
Right. It was
That is men, women.
Right, humankind,
Humankind
right,
is not
right.
saying of one gender or another.
Exactly.
Although, the patriarchal society of the 18th and 19th centuries did have some
Right.
difficulty, and women didn't get to vote until much later.
Right. Right.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that first test was right in Tenafly, where Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton tried voting and were arrested. But where women are could be a threat.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Saudi Arabia. Women are not allowed to leave their home without a male guardian, no matter what age they are. Young women can be married off to someone at the age of 9 and leave their family. Women and men are separated in the culture. Women can't drive. And then women, now they're allowing them to beat women. There was just a court case that was resolved in the Sharia courts in Saudi Arabia, and a man had admitted beating his wife and his daughters, and the judge ruled that he was not guilty because he didn't really leave marks. So, I mean, when you talk about women's rights, I mean, it's just hard to believe that in America that again, it's not that hard to believe, but the women's rights groups wouldn't be up in arms about, the kinds of lives that women are living under as Muslims. I mean, it's just really awful.
I do find it interesting that there is this going hand in hand with liberals and Islam and the Islamic Brotherhood and so forth.
Yeah, it's almost like they're for tyranny, and they don't care what version
Right.
they inflict on us.
Right.
Right?
Because
it is tyranny.
if you take Sharia law at its core, it is a form of tyranny. There is no freedom.
Right.
Especially if you're a woman. In some societies you're required to wear a burqa. You
Right.
can't have anything other than your eyes showing.
That's right.
All those things run contrary to the ideas of freedom. Now, people will say, well, there should be no dictates to religion with our government. In other words, total hands-off and shouldn't be involved at all.
Right.
And if one is to say, well, that there's this wall of separation between church and state, how do we in the United States start to allow religious laws to somehow become regular laws?
Right. In my humble opinion, we can't when it comes to Sharia, because there is no such thing as moderation or just a little bit of Sharia. It's an all or nothing, zero-sum game. Again, when you look at it, they believe that Christians and Jews are not equal. For instance, there's so they're not into equality or working with other religions. That's sort of just a facade from what I understand, that essentially if, for instance, if there are two people walking down the street, one is a Muslim and one is a non-Muslim, under Sharia law, the non-Muslim is obligated to step aside and allow the Muslim person to pass first.
Yeah, I've heard that does not fly with
No.
with equal protection under the law,
Right.
where everyone has the same rights.
That's right.
Now, of course, we do have a history, and our history does have its bad points in that, for example, the Founding Fathers wrestled with the idea of slavery.
Right.
And that wasn't settled until years later when we had the American Civil War. And then the idea of full equality between what one would claim the races. I don't believe that there are separate races. I believe that there's only one, the human race.
Right. I agree.
That whole idea of segregation and equality racially wasn't settled until the 1960s.
Right.
So I see Sharia as something taking us way back.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
Not even to 1776. We're talking
Right.
back to the 7th century.
Absolutely. And to your point, it hasn't changed, right? I mean, that's where it is. And that's what experts talk about who have studied Sharia. They say there are laws that are very, I don't want to use the word antiquated because that sounds disrespectful, but they're based in 7th century life. You know, I mean, for instance, if a woman is caught, you know, being unfaithful to her husband, she's stoned to death. That's under Sharia law. So you have to ask yourself, I mean, if there are punishments for that kind of thing, a lot of punishments have been updated since the 7th century for a crime like that. You know what I'm saying?
They're still stoning people in some Middle Eastern countries.
Right, but I'm saying but that's the point. That was the era where their stoning was pretty commonplace. And to your point, it's still happening.
Right, and it's totally non-compliant to our U.S. Constitution,
not
which
at all.
allows freedom
Right.
for all people.
That's right. And if someone wants to leave and no longer wants to be a Muslim, say they're a child and they brought up in the family and they've been westernized and they don't believe in those truths and they want to pursue another faith, they're put to death. There's honor killings, and that's happened throughout the country as well.
Well, yeah, all of this is just absolutely amazing that there are these societies that act and have these laws and rules. I think it's a big problem for most Americans to come to grips with some of these things,
Right.
because we come from such a different viewpoint
Right.
of how we perceive history, that when you start to look at things in the Middle East, our misunderstanding of them
Right.
becomes problematic, because we naturally assume, well, this is the way it's supposed to be.
Right. Based on our views, right? And our
views,
experience in our
And
world.
it causes
Absolutely.
us to have to really start to become educated and to learn about the details of who's who and what's what,
Right.
as to how countries over in the Mideast and places like that
Right.
operate, and whether or not that's some road that we want to go down. Speaking of roads that we want to go down,
Right.
we do need to go to a break. We're going to want to have a time for you to learn about who we are, the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Please visit us at our website, NewJerseyTeaPartyCoalition.org. And as we go to this break, we'll be coming back and speaking more about Sharia law and the United States Constitution and our laws.
With all the excitement happening with the Tea Party, it may be a little hard to separate fact from fiction. Find out the truth for yourself. Visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition's website at www.njteapartycoalition.org. You may find a common voice to your concerns on how our government is functioning, and discover a means to help restore our nation based on the proven principles of our Constitution.
Welcome back. My name is Tim Adrians. I'm with the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. I'd like to encourage you to visit our website, NewJerseyTeaPartyCoalition.org, and there you can find our core principles, which specifically really state what we're all about in the Tea Party. If I could put it in a nutshell, we're about liberty and freedom, personal responsibility, and we revere the United States Constitution. Today we've been talking about Sharia law, and how that poses a problem for us as Americans under our constitutional government. With me is Laura Walsh. Laura, we've been talking about the Sharia law and the difficulties that it has in America. I guess the first question is, can one be a Muslim here in the United States and follow our U.S. Constitution, and then somehow in their private life, in your private life, live under Sharia?
Yeah, Tim, I think that's the key question, you know, for all of us, is because when you look at Sharia embodies public and private, secular and religious. And when Sharia is practiced fully in a society, and it doesn't allow people who are non-Muslim to hold positions, say, in government or power. So it really creeps into every aspect of one's life. So I think your question is the key one, and I think we all have to decide how religious somebody is, and is there a different Muslim Islam practice in the United States than elsewhere?
That's
right?
a good question. I know, for example, that when John F. Kennedy was elected, there were people who were concerned that the president was somehow going to be dictated by the Vatican since he was a Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And I think what we saw throughout his presidency was that never came to any fruition. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, in his practicing of his Catholicism, it was something that, as far as I know, was a private matter in his life, and he never spoke a word of it, per se, to the American public. Can a Muslim person live that kind of a life here in America? In other words, are there Muslim people who are equivalent to the Christmas and Easter Christians,
right,
who really don't follow, or you were saying before we were talking, you were talking about cafeteria Catholics, where
right,
they pick and choose what doctrines and things that they'll believe and practice, and the other ones that they don't like will be pushed to the side. I guess with some Muslims today in America, mm-hmm, that you're finding that they're of a stripe where their faith is private, and they're living their life here in America, which mm-hmm, makes them good neighbors to everyone else. You have your religion, I have my religion. We're all happy to be here in America and right, live together. Right. So when does it become a problem?
Yeah, it seems that when the numbers increase, Tim, when there becomes a larger community, when you look at, say, Detroit in Michigan, mm-hmm, you know, there's areas of Michigan that are dominated by people of the Muslim faith, and that's kind of natural when you look at, you know, immigration patterns, because people do tend to live in neighborhoods, you know, where mm-hmm, they feel comfortable with people like themselves and different, same background. But what's happened in Michigan is it's become very difficult for people who are non-Muslim to integrate into the society. So it's almost like the larger, as Islam grows and as more and more Muslims either convert in the United States or come from elsewhere, that they're demanding that Sharia be imposed really on the rest of us. And that's what's happened in Europe. That's what we're seeing now.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem in Europe. And I've heard about instances, you know, where you have Dearborn, Michigan, so
right,
forth,
exactly,
where you've got this group of people that now are becoming dominant. That may not be a bad thing in some respects, right, if we were to follow our history. In America, when the 13 colonies became the 13 states, mm-hmm, and the Constitution was adopted, mm-hmm, we specifically put in there that Congress shall not make any law establishing a state religion. Right. But at that same time, amongst the 13 various states, many of them had their own religion of their state.
That's right.
Right. Where, for example, in Massachusetts, your taxes were actually being used to underwrite the church. Right. They were Protestant, and for example, down in Maryland, they predominantly were Catholic. Right. So you did see these different viewpoints. There seems to be a shifting away of that, or there has been a shifting mm-hmm, away of that, where the state constitutions may not necessarily today, and I'm sure that they don't, mm-hmm, dictate a specific religious belief or practice, not like in the 18th century with some of the older ones, where it said that you had to be a Christian in order mm-hmm, to be a part of the government. If we were to go back to a true 10th Amendment viewpoint of our Constitution, where the states did everything that were not specifically enumerated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution for the government to do. In other words, a very limited federal government, thereby giving the states the power to do everything else. As long as it didn't bother another state, could we have a Islamic state of one of the 50 or 2 or 3?
And still adhere to the Constitution? I don't know how you could. Look at liberty. I mean, again, if the model is an Islamic country that is Sharia compliant, right, like Saudi Arabia, well, you're not allowed to be free. If you and I visited Saudi Arabia, we would not be allowed to practice our religion. We would need a letter that is authorized by our employer and stamped by immigration. We'd have to carry that letter with us as we travel throughout the country. There's roadblocks. There, a lot of policing at the roadblocks and at airports, and you're arrested. You're not just told deported, but they arrest you. So again, I'm looking at what's existing already. I don't understand how they could be Sharia compliant and also be adhering to the Constitution. I mean, you just don't see how that is possible.
And I think I know for a fact. I know for a fact in our United States government. There are instances, say, some Indian tribes where some hallucinogenic herbs and things like that are part of their religious worship.
Right.
The government has said, sorry, wait a minute, you can't do that.
Right.
If you were part of a religious viewpoint that said that you could have multiple wives.
That's right.
That is something that the federal government has said, sorry, you can't do that. So I'm sure there's a posing of a problem for Islamics, for Muslims, in regard to practicing Sharia to its fullest extent. I don't think we're going to get an answer tonight or in this one session or talking about it. I guess the main thing is that those of us who are not Islamics, who want to welcome our neighbors and have them as part of the community, because in the United States we're generally tolerant of everyone. If you live by the rules of the town, raise your kids right, who cares what you do?
It is, but I think that what's happening is we're seeing, for instance, in New York, the cab drivers, many are Muslim, and what neighbors have been taking photographs on Riverside Drive and 72nd Street. There's prayer 5 times a day. Well, the Muslim cab drivers are all congregating in this one block on 72nd and Riverside, double parking their taxis, getting out and praying in the middle of the road. Their shoes are neatly, lined up, and they're not causing any problems. But you know what it's like. None of us can double park in Manhattan. If you leave your car and you're even taking a sick relative to the hospital, they'll still ticket you.
Right.
Well, the law's not being enforced.
I think that's one of the major complaints that people have.
So what is this? Is it equal?
Right. So I guess our message to our Muslim neighbors is that we welcome you as part of our community.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the United States. But as we are this melting pot, we do have to live together, and we expect everyone to follow the same laws and be equal under those laws.
That's right.
So if you want to start having your own special way, then we've got a problem.
Exactly, and you brought up polygamy earlier, and polygamy is practiced under Sharia, and a man can have 4 wives, and he can divorce her on the spot, and bring in a new wife to keep the number at 4. So what does that mean in America? If that's practiced, then obviously it's illegal for us. But in courts in Europe, they're granting that people who are Muslim can abide by those laws, even though it breaks.
I think as our group and the Tea Parties nationwide, as we're such strong adherents, and it's been said that we're fundamentalists in our viewpoint of the Constitution. Any group or person that is trying to get extra special attention, skirting of laws, like I can park my car here because I have to go pray, things like that, or anything that is making you somehow more special than someone else,
Right.
runs contrary and is something that we have a difficulty with
Right.
as individuals who revere our Constitution.
They do, but do you think, I mean, we're having this great discussion, but I haven't heard discussions like this in the mainstream media, have you?
No, I haven't, and I'd like,
You know?
I would welcome and
Right.
it would be interesting to have a Muslim
Yes, absolutely.
speak about Sharia law and how it can be compliant to the U.S. Constitution.
Absolutely.
And how they can practice their faith and
Right.
we can practice ours, and we can live compatible to one another.
Yes.
I'm thinking that perhaps maybe some of the Muslims here in the United States, or maybe it's quite a few, I don't know, want to basically just live their lives and be left alone. But when does their wanting to practice what they want to do jive with ours, when theirs might be saying you have to agree with us?
That's right. That's right. And a big part of this, we're seeing it incrementally. I think there were a couple of cases that were highlighted. In a meatpacking plant in the Midwest, there were some Muslim employees, and they pray 5 times a day and needed 3 prayer times during the course of the workday, and that was not in compliance with the rules and the practices of this company, but they made special provisions for the Muslim workers, and it created a lot of dissent among the entire staff, because people who are not Muslim are saying, well, gee, you know, I would like to have 3 breaks a day, you know, and just because I'm not a Muslim, does that mean I don't get those breaks either? You know, and then down in Florida, a young woman was working for Disney, and she wanted to wear a burqa. And they said, well, no, you know, we can make other accommodations. And they came up with a long list of ways that she could integrate the burqa in. They change her job, give her different responsibilities, same pay, no worries. And she, you know, rejected it and brought it to court. So we're seeing a lot of this. It would be great to have conversations with folks, as you said, you know, who are practicing Muslims here, to find out if that's how they feel about that. You know, what's their thinking on the push, if you will,
Right.
for us to change our lives and our.
Well, I don't think it's up to us
You know?
as Americans to give up our culture. I don't think it's up to us as Americans to
Right.
give up our laws, to give up our Constitution and institute something else. I started off our program saying that I'm a strong believer in the separation of mosque and state.
Right.
We need to have our laws protected. We need to preserve the Constitution. That's so important, folks. You've got to make sure that you at least read the Constitution and know what it says. Liberty and freedom, we have to preserve it